She walked into that wedding hall 8 months pregnant, holding an invitation with her own name on it, believing the night would finally make her belong. She walked out alone, not because she was weak, not because she begged and lost, but because the man she married stood in front of 300 people and chose someone else, and did not even flinch when he did it. This is the story of what happens to a woman after the world decides she is finished. Stay until the end, hit like, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Damn. The invitation was printed on cream paper with gold embossing, and Amara Ellis had read it so many times in the back of the taxi that the edges had softened from the heat of her hands. The Kang family winter banquet, annual gathering, formal dress required. And at the bottom, handwritten in Min Jae's tight, careful script, "Come, it's time they see you as one of us." She had not been able to stop staring at those words. Time they see you as one of us. 8 months. 8 months of growing this child inside her, of watching her body change in ways she had not anticipated, of waking at 3 in the morning to the particular silence of a Seoul winter and reaching across the bed for a man who was not there as often as he used to be. 8 months of telling herself it was business pressure, family obligation, the weight of succession that a woman like her from Lagos by way of hard work and ambition could not be expected to fully understand. She had told herself a lot of things. The taxi pulled up to the Lotte World Tower's private banquet entrance, and the building cut the January sky like a blade. Amara paid the driver, tucked the invitation into her clutch, and stood on the curb for a moment with the cold eating through her coat. Her back ached. It had ached for 3 days in a way that was constant and dull and deeply unglamorous. She pressed one hand against the lower curve of her abdomen, a reflex now, not even conscious, and breathed. The doorman looked at her invitation and then at her face. There was a half-second delay before he stepped aside. She was used to those delays. Inside, the hall was already full. 300 people at minimum, arranged around circular tables covered in white linen, crystal catching the light from a chandelier that probably cost more than the average Seoul apartment. The Kang family knew how to perform wealth. They had been performing it for 3 generations. Amara had spent 4 years trying to learn the choreography. She spotted Min Jae's younger cousin first, Park Hyun-soo, who had always been the one person in the family who didn't look at her like she was a problem requiring a diplomatic solution. He was standing near the bar, and his face when he saw her did something she did not know how to read. Not surprise. Something closer to pain. She told herself she was misreading it. The room shifted around her as she moved deeper into it. She felt the looks, the particular brand of polite Korean society attention that registered her skin, her pregnancy, her presence, filed it, and then returned to other conversations without lingering. She had cataloged every variation of that look over 4 years. This one felt different tonight, more concentrated, more careful. Min Jae was on the far side of the room near the head table. She saw him before he saw her. He was in a dark navy suit, the kind tailored specifically for him, and he was standing close to a woman in a red dress who was laughing at something he had said. The woman had the particular ease of someone who had spent her whole life knowing she belonged exactly where she stood. Yoon Seol-ah. Amara knew the name because she had heard it in fragments over the past 2 months. A business connection, a family friend, the daughter of a political figure whose influence the Kang Empire had been courting. Min Jae had told her it was nothing. He had said it the way people say things they have already stopped believing themselves. Amara stopped walking. The ache in her back pulsed. The child shifted inside her. She felt the movement, that strange internal pressure that never stopped being both alien and extraordinary. And she put her hand against her coat again without thinking. From across the room, Min Jae finally saw her. His face did something terrible. Not guilt, exactly. More like the expression of a man watching a problem materialize at exactly the wrong moment. His jaw tightened. He said something quietly to the woman in red, and the woman in red did not look at Amara, which meant she already knew Amara was there, which meant this was not accidental, which meant Madame Kang Hye-jin appeared at Amara's side. 61 years old, 5 feet 3 inches, and more precisely dangerous than anyone Amara had encountered in 4 years inside this family. She wore a deep burgundy qipao-style dress, and her hair was pinned with a jeweled clip that had probably been in the family for a century. She smelled like magnolia. Amara. Her voice was smooth and without warmth, the way marble is smooth. I'm glad you came. The sentence had been constructed to tell her the opposite. Madam Kang. Amara held the woman's gaze. She had trained herself not to look away first. You look well. You should be resting. Hyejin's eyes moved to Amara's belly with the cool assessment of someone evaluating an asset. The cold is not good for the child. I was invited. Yes. A pause that lasted exactly the right number of seconds to communicate something without saying it. Min-jae wanted you here tonight. She drifted away before Amara could respond, moving with the frictionless efficiency of a woman who had been navigating rooms like this for 4 decades. Amara watched her go and felt the cold of the building settle into her despite the heat of several hundred bodies. She should have left then. She did not leave, because she had spent 4 years not leaving when Hyejin's cold dinners made her feel like furniture, not leaving when Min-jae's late nights stretched into patterns she could not explain away, not leaving when the Kong family advisors began treating her international business contacts as a resource the family might eventually exploit rather than achievements that belonged to her. She had stayed because she loved her husband, because she was carrying his child, because she had built something real and painful and expensive inside this marriage, and she was not the kind of woman who walked away from what she had built. She found a seat near the edge of the room and accepted a glass of water from a passing server and waited. The program began at 8, a formal welcome from one of the senior Kang family representatives. The usual inventory of the year's accomplishments, framed in the corporate language that mafia families in the 21st century used to describe their operations. The room listened with the attentive respect of people who understood that their continued prosperity depended on being seen to be paying attention. Amara listened with half her focus and kept the other half on Min-jae, who had not come to sit beside her. At 8:40, he took the microphone. He was good at this. The public version of himself, the one that commanded rooms. She had admired it once. She had thought it meant he was strong. It took her years to understand that confidence and courage are not the same thing. He spoke about the family's direction, about alliances, about the kind of strength that required making difficult choices for the sake of something larger than personal feeling. He used words like stability and legacy and the future of what we have built together. The room was nodding. Amara's hand had gone very still against her abdomen. Then Min-jae said Seol-ah's name. He said it the way you say the name of someone you have already decided the future with. He extended his hand toward the woman in the red dress, and she rose from her seat, and the room made the sound that rooms make when everyone in them already knows what is happening except one person. Yoon Seol-ah will stand beside me from this point forward, Min-jae said into the microphone. Our families have discussed what this organization needs to grow. Sentiment cannot be the foundation of an empire. I hope everyone will extend her the respect appropriate to her position. He did not say Amara's name. He did not need to. 300 people understood. 300 people turned, some immediately and some after a delay of 2 or 3 seconds, to find Amara Ellis in the room. And she was there. She had not disappeared. She had not had the mercy of not being present for this. She was sitting near the edge of the room in her coat with her hand on her pregnant belly, and her face was... What was her face doing? She could not feel her face. She could feel her heartbeat. She could feel the child move. She could feel the cold of the glass in her other hand and the specific physical sensation of 300 people watching her receive a humiliation so precise and deliberate that it could only have been designed. One woman near the center of the room looked at Amara with something that might have been pity or might have been relief that it was not her. A man at the table nearest her cleared his throat and looked at his hands. Hyun-soo, across the room, had gone pale. Min-jae was not looking at her. Seol-ah, standing beside him with her hand in his, was not looking at her either. Amara set her water glass down. The sound it made against the table was quiet and precise. She stood. This required more physical coordination than it should have. 8 months along, a body that no longer moved the way she told it to. But she stood, and she did not grip the table for support, even though she wanted to, and she did not press both hands to her belly, even though the child had begun moving in a way that felt urgent and uncomfortable. She walked toward the door, across 300 feet of polished floor, past tables and crystal, and the controlled silence of people who did not know what to do with what they were watching. She kept her shoulders back. She did not walk fast. She did not look at Minji. She did not look at Seola. She did not look at Madame Kang Hye-jin, who she could feel watching from somewhere in the room with the particular satisfaction of a woman who had finally seen something resolved the way she always intended. The doorman held the door. She walked through it. The January air hit her like something physical, a cold that pressed against her skin and cut into the open collar of her coat. Seoul at night in winter. The street outside the tower was lit by the particular blue-white of high-end commercial lighting, and there were cars moving on the road beyond the entrance, and somewhere a block away a delivery motorcycle was pulling away from a curb, and all of it was completely indifferent to the fact that she had just walked out of the worst 8 minutes of her adult life. She stood on the pavement. She had nowhere to go. That was the mechanical fact of it. She had given up the apartment she had before the marriage. The house she lived in now was the Kang family house. Her phone had 36% battery. She had enough in her purse to take a taxi to a hotel and pay for one night, maybe two if the hotel was modest, which would get her to a point where she would have to make a set of decisions she was not ready to think about yet. She was not going to cry on this pavement. She had made that decision somewhere between Min Jae's first sentence and his last, and she intended to keep it. She pulled out her phone to call for a taxi. It rang in her hand before she could open the app. Unknown number, Seoul area code. She almost did not answer. Her thumb moved across the screen before she had consciously decided to accept it. Amara Ellis. The voice was male, low, Korean-accented English, precise and unhurried, the voice of a man who had never needed to rush anything he said because the room always waited. I know what happened tonight. She didn't respond. My name is Han Seong-woo. A beat. You don't know me, but I know the Kang family very well, and I know what Min Jae just destroyed. She was standing on a pavement in January with a dead marriage behind her and an unborn child pressing against her ribs and a stranger's voice in her ear, and something in the way he had said destroyed made her keep listening. Not because she trusted him. She trusted no one tonight, but because the word was accurate, and accuracy, right now, was the only thing she had. I have a proposal, Seong-woo said. Not tonight, not until you're ready, but I want you to know the option exists. How did you get this number? She said. Her voice came out level. She was surprised. The same way I know what table you were sitting at tonight. The same way I know you walked out instead of making a scene, which tells me more about you than Min Jae ever understood. Another pause. Measured. I have resources. I have reasons for those resources. And tonight, I have a question. She waited. Do you want to disappear? He said, or do you want to rebuild? The cold pressed in around her. The child moved again, slow and deliberate, a weight that reminded her she was not only making decisions for herself anymore. She looked back at the tower's entrance. The doorman was watching her with professional neutrality. Through the glass, she could see the faint glitter of the banquet still in progress. 300 people resuming their evening as if nothing had altered the shape of the world tonight. She turned back to the street. Give me a time and a location, she said into the phone. I'll decide when I get there. The silence on the line lasted 2 seconds, and in that silence, she thought she heard something that was not quite surprise and was not quite respect, but was somewhere between the two. Tomorrow, Han Seong-woo said. Noon. I'll send the address. The line went quiet. Amara stood on the pavement with her phone in her hand and the Seoul winter pressing cold and indifferent against every inch of her, and she thought about the invitation she had been holding in the taxi. Come. It's time they see you as one of us. Min Jae had been right about one thing. Tonight, finally, everyone had seen her clearly. What none of them had understood, not Min Jae, not Madame Kang, not a single person in that room, was that the woman they had just publicly discarded had spent 4 years learning the architecture of their world from the inside. Every alliance, every pressure point, every obligation that powerful families owed each other and spent their lives maneuvering around. She had learned it the way an outsider learns anything, carefully, quietly, without being credited for the education. She flagged a taxi. She told the driver a hotel name, the first one that came to mind, a business hotel in Mapogu where nobody would know her face. She settled into the back seat and pressed her back against the door because the ache had sharpened, and she watched the tower disappear in the rear window. The child moved inside her, steady and real and hers. She had one night to decide whether Han Seong-woo was a lifeline or another door into a room she would later need to fight her way out of. One night. She had never needed more than that to make a decision that changed everything. The hotel room was a rectangle of pale walls and functional furniture, the kind of room designed specifically so that no one would ever feel anything inside it. Amara had chosen it for exactly that reason. She did not sleep. She lay on her left side the way the prenatal books had told her to, one pillow wedged beneath her belly and another between her knees, and she stared at the wall while the sole night pressed against the window and the child inside her moved in the slow, oceanic way she had come to understand as the baby being awake and considering things. It was 20 minutes past 2 in the morning. The hotel radiator made a ticking sound every few minutes, metal expanding and contracting, the building adjusting itself to the cold outside. She thought about the way Min Jae's jaw had tightened when he saw her across the room. Not guilt. She needed to be honest about that. She had been looking for guilt in her husband's face for months and finding smaller, uglier things instead. Irritation, calculation, the expression of a man managing a situation rather than living inside a relationship. Tonight had just been the moment when he stopped managing it quietly. Her phone had 14 missed calls by the time she checked it at midnight. None from Min Jae. 3 from Hyun Soo. 2 from a family lawyer whose name she recognized from the Kang family's internal directory. The rest from numbers she did not recognize, which meant word had spread to people she had never considered allies and probably still shouldn't. She did not call any of them back. At 6 in the morning, she got up, showered with the water as hot as she could stand it, and sat on the edge of the bed in the hotel bathrobe eating crackers from the minibar because her stomach had been unreliable in mornings for 4 months and she had learned not to push it. The address Han Seong-woo had sent arrived at 6:43. A building in Seongdong-gu. A restaurant name. Noon. She read the message 3 times and then set the phone face down on the mattress and finished her crackers. The decision was not whether to go. She had already decided in the taxi. The decision was whether to walk into that room prepared for the specific kind of manipulation that powerful Korean men used on women they had identified as temporarily vulnerable, or whether she was going to underestimate the man and pay for it. She knew enough about Han Seong-woo to understand that underestimating him would be expensive. She had heard his name in the Kang family household the way you hear the name of a weather system. Not a person, exactly, more a force with a direction and a history of damage. Min Jae had mentioned him twice in 4 years. Both times he had been careful about it, the careful way he was never careful about anyone else, which told her more than the actual content of what he had said. The Kang family and the Han network had been rivals for 3 years. Before that, they had been something more complicated. She did not know the specifics. She had not been meant to. She knew enough. She ordered breakfast from room service and ate half of it, and then put on the clothes she had worn the previous night because she had nothing else. And at 10, she took a taxi to a clothing district she knew in Dongdaemun and bought a change of clothes in 20 minutes flat, dark trousers, a loose black top that accommodated her belly without performing her pregnancy, a coat that fit. She was not going to walk into that meeting looking like a woman who had spent the night in crisis. She got to Seongdong-gu 40 minutes early and sat in a coffee shop across the street from the restaurant and drank hot water and watched the building. A black vehicle arrived at 11:40. 2 men got out first, moved with the practiced low-visibility efficiency of people paid to assess spaces before other people entered them. Then Han Seong-woo. She had expected older. He was 44, she knew that much, but he carried it differently than she had constructed in her mind. Tall for a Korean man, broad across the shoulders, moving with the unhurried weight of someone for whom an arrival is an event that other people adjust to. Dark coat. No visible security beyond the 2 men who had preceded him, both of whom had already positioned themselves inside the restaurant entrance without appearing to do so deliberately. He did not look across the street. She watched him go inside. At noon exactly, she crossed the street, pushed through the restaurant door, and found him already seated at a corner table with his back to the wall and a clear sightline to the entrance. Of course, the restaurant had been closed to other diners. She registered that immediately from the emptiness of it, the single server standing near the kitchen door. And the table was set with tea and a small arrangement of food she had not been asked about, which meant either he had guessed or he had done research on what a pregnant woman could comfortably eat, both of which were interesting. She sat down across from him without waiting to be invited. Han Seong-woo looked at her for a moment before he said anything. Not the inventory kind of look she was used to receiving in this country. Something more direct than that. Evaluative in a way that included rather than reduced. "You came early," he said. His English was precise and slightly formal in the way of someone who had learned it functionally rather than culturally. "And you watched from across the street before coming in. You expected something different?" "No," he said. "That's why I came early." The server poured tea. Amara wrapped both hands around the cup for the warmth and did not drink it yet. "You said you had a proposal," she said. "I said I had a question first." He set his own cup down. "How much do you know about why Min-jae did what he did last night?" "I know he chose an alliance over a marriage." "That's the surface." "I'm aware it's the surface." She held his gaze. "I'm asking what's underneath it." He was quiet for 2 seconds in a way that felt like adjustment rather than hesitation. "The Kang family has a debt problem," Seong-woo said. "Not financial, political. They made commitments 3 years ago to a network of families in the South that they have not been able to fulfill. The Yoon family is the mechanism for fulfilling them. Seola is not a wife. She's a transaction. Min-jae knows this. He chose to be a transaction. He chose to survive." A pause. "I'm not defending him. I'm giving you accurate information because what you decide to do next should be based on the actual situation, not on what the night felt like." Amara looked at him. The ache in her back was present again, lower now and more diffuse, the kind that came from poor sleep and tension held in muscles for too many hours. She was aware of it the way she was aware of her own breathing, constantly, involuntarily, without letting it show. "Why do you care what I decide to do next?" she said. "Because the Kang family's weakness is currently my opportunity," he said, with a flatness that she found more honest than any polished answer would have been. "I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Min-jae publicly humiliated you in front of 300 people who represent every significant power family in Seoul's network. That changes the calculus for every alliance the Kang family has. It signals instability. It signals that Min-jae makes emotional decisions and then dresses them up as strategic ones, which is the most dangerous kind of leader." He lifted his tea and drank. "His weakness benefits me. Your situation gives me a specific opportunity that I intend to act on. And you're telling me this directly. I find it more efficient." She studied him. There was something she had not expected in the texture of this conversation. Not warmth exactly, nothing that performed warmth, but a kind of lateral honesty that she had not encountered inside the Kang family once in 4 years. They had always talked to her like she was a fact that required ongoing management. This man was talking to her like she was a variable that had weight. "What's the proposal?" she said. "A marriage alliance." He said it without decoration. "Formal, legal, with conditions drafted before any agreement is signed. You would have financial independence, specifically a capital fund in your name before the ceremony, enough to establish yourself independently if you later choose to leave. You retain full parental rights over your child with no interference from my family or my organization. You are not required to perform any role in my professional operations. You are not a political symbol." He paused. "In exchange, the existence of the alliance itself sends a message to every family in Seoul's network. That message being that the woman Min-jae discarded was worth picking up." The bluntness of it landed somewhere between offensive and clarifying. Amara let the silence run for a moment. "You're using me," she said. "I'm offering you a structure that uses us both," he said. "There's a difference. And if I decide to leave Korea entirely, I'll provide the financial support to do it comfortably." He said it without hesitation, which meant it was not a bluff. That option doesn't require you to give me anything. I'll do it because what Min Jae did last night crossed a line that has nothing to do with my rivalry with his family. She had not expected that sentence. She let it sit. Outside, a delivery truck was moving slowly down the Seongdong-gu street, and she could hear the muffled sound of it through the restaurant glass. And the child shifted inside her, and Amara thought about the hotel room last night, and the crackers from the minibar, and the 14 missed calls, and the complete and total absence of Min Jae's name anywhere in those calls. I need time, she said. You have it. Days, not hours. Take what you need. She stood. He stood. She noted that, the instinct of it, not a performance, and she picked up her coat from the back of her chair. I have conditions beyond what you've described, she said, if I decide to consider this. Write them down, he said. All of them. I'll read them. She left. On the pavement outside, the January cold wrapped around her immediately, and she stood for a moment breathing it in, trying to read her own instincts past the noise of the last 18 hours. Han Seong-woo was not a safe man. She knew that with complete clarity. He operated in the same world Min Jae operated in, used the same currencies of leverage and reputation, and carefully constructed power. The difference, and she was not naive enough to call it a redemption, was that he had been transparent about what he wanted and why, and he had given her exit options before she had asked for them. Min Jae had never once given her an exit option. She walked toward the main road to find a taxi. Her phone rang. This time she recognized the number, Kang Hyun-soo. She answered. Are you safe? He said it before she could speak, and his voice had the tight, controlled register of someone who had been holding that question in for hours. I'm fine, she said. Where are you? Somewhere that isn't the family house. She watched a taxi pass without flagging it. Is there a reason you're calling, Hyun-soo, or are you the family's way of checking whether I've made a scene somewhere? A pause that was long enough to answer that question partially. I'm calling because I knew last night was going to happen and I didn't warn you, he said. And I've been trying to figure out how to say that since midnight. The cold pressed in. Amara stopped walking. You knew. A week ago, maybe 10 days. His voice was strained. They told me it was decided. They said it was better if you... He stopped. I'm sorry. That's not adequate. I know it's not. The specific sensation that moved through her then was not anger, though anger was present. It was more structural than anger, the feeling of a load-bearing wall being removed from something you had believed was solid. Who else knew? She said. Most of the senior family. A breath. Song-il, the lawyers, my uncle. Hye-jin, obviously. She's the one who engineered the Yoon alliance in the first place. And Min Jae. Min Jae has been... Another stop. She could hear him working out how much to say. He's been under pressure you don't fully know about. The Southern families have been pulling support for 2 years. Without the Yoon alliance, the organization loses 3 major distribution networks and a political protection agreement that covers every senior member. He genuinely believed... Don't, she said. Not loudly, but Hyun-soo went quiet immediately. Don't explain him to me. I have spent 4 years explaining him to myself, and I have run out of capacity for it. Silence. Is there anything I can do? He said finally. Yes, she said. Tell me the name of the Kang family's primary legal counsel, the one who handles the estate documents. A longer pause. Why? Because I am still legally married to Min Jae, and I am carrying a child who is legally a member of this family, and I want to know exactly what my position is before I make any decisions. Her voice was even. She had found the floor of herself somewhere in the hotel room last night, and she was standing on it now. The lawyer's name, Hyun-soo. He gave it to her. She hung up and wrote it down and flagged a taxi. The next 4 days were the most precisely useful days she had spent in 4 years. She met with the Kang family lawyer, a careful man named Oh Jae-won, who was professional enough to tell her the truth when she asked the right questions, and frightened enough of liability to be thorough about it. Her legal standing as Min Jae's wife was intact until dissolution was formally filed. The child, once born, would carry legal claims on the Kang estate regardless of the marriage status. Under both Korean family law and the internal succession documents the Kang family had filed with their organizational structure. She had not known about the succession documents. She sat in Oh-jae-won's office for 2 hours and listened to him explain a structure that had been built before she ever entered this world, and she understood, methodically and without drama, that the child she was carrying represented something the Kang family had been slowly and completely failing to account for. She wrote down everything. On the third day, Min-jae called. She was in a different hotel by then. She had moved once, paying cash, the kind of instinct she had not known she possessed until it arrived naturally. She looked at his name on the screen for 4 rings and then answered because she needed to hear what he sounded like now that the performance was finished. Amara. His voice was tired. That was unexpected. Not guilty, not defensive, just tired in the particular way of a man who has been told a plan would be clean and is discovering it isn't. Min-jae, she said, I need you to hear me out. You had 300 people watching when you had something to say. I'm not sure why you need a private audience now. She heard him exhale. What I did was a pause. It wasn't about you not being enough. You need to understand that. I understand that you believe that. The family don't. The same word she had used with Hyun-soo, and the same silence followed it. You're calling me to manage this. I know what managing looks like. You've been managing me for a year and a half. She moved to the window and looked out at the Han River, gray and distant beneath the January sky. Tell me what you actually want from this call. A longer silence. I want you to not do anything that damages what's left, he said finally. And there it was, clean and undecorated. Not, I'm sorry. Not what do you need. Not even how is the child. What he wanted was for her to remain manageable. Goodbye, Min-jae, she said. She ended the call. She sat with the phone in her hand and looked at the river and felt the child move and thought about Han Sung-woo's question. Do you want to disappear or do you want to rebuild? And understood that the answer had been forming in her since the moment she set down the water glass in the banquet hall and stood up. On the 4th day, she wrote her conditions. She took 3 hours to do it, working at the hotel desk with the kind of concentration she had once applied to business proposals in Lagos, in a different life, when the only thing she had to protect was her own ambition. The list was specific, legal in its precision, and comprehensive enough that any lawyer reading it would understand she had not arrived at it emotionally. Full parental authority, capital fund transferred prior to any ceremony, a specific amount, large enough to build on, in an account with her name only. No operational involvement in Seong-woo's organization, nothing that could constitute legal exposure. Freedom of movement, including international travel. The right to dissolve the arrangement without financial penalty after 2 years, at her discretion. And one more condition, the last one, which she added after a moment of stillness with the pen in her hand. No lies. If you know something that affects me or my child, you tell me, before I need to find out another way. She sent it. His response came in 40 minutes. Accepted. All conditions. My lawyer will draft the formal documents. Do you want to review them before or after we meet again? She read the message twice. Then she typed, before. His response came in under a minute. Correct answer. She set the phone down and pressed both hands against her belly and breathed. The documents arrived the next morning via a courier she had not expected to be so fast. She spent the afternoon with her own lawyer, a woman she had found independently outside the Kang family network, a Korean-Nigerian bilingual attorney named Bae Soo-jin, who specialized in international family law and who read through the Han documents with the quiet, comprehensive attention of someone dismantling a mechanism to check for hidden parts. These are unusually complete, Bae Soo-jin said, setting the last page down. And the capital transfer is set to precede the ceremony by 72 hours. That's not standard. Is it enforceable? As written, yes. She looked at Amara across the desk. He's given you more structural protection than most women get in conventional marriages. That's not a high bar. No, Bae Soo-jin said. It's not. But in this particular world, it's notable. Amara took the documents home, hotel home, the only home she currently had, and sat with them until midnight, and thought about Min Jae's call and Hyun Soo's voice, and Madame Kang's magnolia perfume, and the doorman's half-second delay, and everything she had learned in 4 years about the way powerful families consumed the people they invited inside. She thought about what she was walking into. She thought about what she was walking out of. And she thought about the child, who was moving now in the restless, insistent way of someone who had run out of patience with waiting, and who had no vote in any of this, but whose entire future was being shaped by the decisions made in this hotel room in the January dark. She signed the documents at 12:17 in the morning. She sat back and looked at her signature on the last page, and felt the specific silence that follows an irreversible action. Not peace, not certainty, something more stripped down than either. The silence of a woman who has made the only decision available to her and is not going to spend any more time pretending there was a gentler option. Her phone lit up. A message from a number she now recognized. Documents received. Ceremony is 11 days from today. Get some sleep. She almost didn't respond. Then she typed, "Don't tell me what to do. 3 seconds." "Fair enough," he wrote back. She turned off the light. 11 days. In 11 days, she would become the wife of the one man in Seoul's underworld that the Kang family had spent 3 years trying not to make into an enemy, and what none of them knew yet. Not Min Jae, not Madame Kang, not Seol Ah in her red dress, not any of the 300 people who had watched Amara Ellis walk out of that banquet hall, was that tucked inside the legal documents Bae Soo Jin had reviewed was a clause referencing the child's bloodline rights, a clause that O.J. Wan had explained, and that Amara had since verified independently. A clause that meant the baby coming in 6 weeks was not simply the discarded heir of a crumbling marriage, but the single most legally significant person in the Kang family succession structure. And once that truth became known, everything that the Kang family had sacrificed Amara to protect was going to come apart from the inside. The ceremony took place on a Tuesday. Not a grand affair. Nothing that performed sentiment it didn't have. A private room in a government registration office in Mapogu, 2 witnesses Seong-woo had provided, and Bae Soo Jin standing beside Amara in a charcoal blazer with a pen already uncapped. The registrar read the required language in Korean, and Bae Soo Jin translated in a low murmur beside Amara's ear, and Amara signed where she was told to sign, and Han Seong-woo signed beside her with the careful, unhurried signature of a man who had signed important documents many times and understood that the weight of them lived in the consequences, not the ceremony. It took 11 minutes. Outside on the pavement, Bae Soo Jin shook Amara's hand and told her to call if anything felt wrong, and then left in a taxi. Song-woo's 2 witnesses had already withdrawn to the black vehicle idling at the curb. Song-woo stood beside her on the pavement with his coat collar up against the February cold and looked at the street. "The capital transfer cleared this morning," he said. "You should have received the confirmation." "I did." She had checked it at 7 a.m. The number in her account had made her sit very still for a full minute. "Thank you." He nodded. Not warmly, not coldly, the nod of a man acknowledging a completed transaction between equals. "The Kang family will know by tomorrow," he said. "Probably tonight. I have people who will make sure of it." "Good." He looked at her then, a brief lateral glance, and she thought she saw something in it that was not calculation. Something more careful than that, more personal, but he did not pursue it, and neither did she. "My house has a guest suite," he said. "Fully separated, your own entrance. You are not required to share any space you don't choose to." "I know, it's in the documents. I'm saying it again so you hear it from a person and not a contract." She looked at him. The February air was moving between them, cold and without judgment. "All right," she said. She moved into the Han estate in Yongsan-gu 3 days later with 2 suitcases and a box of books, and the particular compressed efficiency of a woman who has moved before under difficult circumstances and learned to travel light. The guest suite was larger than she had expected, with windows that faced a garden currently bare and gray with winter, and a bathroom with heated floors that she discovered at midnight on the first night and stood on for 10 minutes with her eyes closed because her feet had been cold for weeks, and warmth, right now, was not something she took for granted. She did not see Seong-woo for 2 days. He ran an organization. She understood that. People came and went from the main section of the estate at hours that suggested the concept of a conventional workday was not something his world had agreed to observe. She heard voices sometimes through the wing's connecting corridor. Not clearly, just the register and rhythm of serious conversations conducted in serious tones. She did not try to listen. It was not her world, and she had not agreed to make it her world, and she was focused on other things. Specifically, she was focused on the child. 6 weeks out, Bae Cheng-hee, the obstetrician she had transferred to after leaving the Kang family's private physician, had told her the baby was positioned correctly. Weight was good. Everything that needed to be in order was in order. She had sat in that appointment and listened to the heartbeat through the monitor, that steady, insistent percussion that never failed to reorganize everything else she was thinking about, and made a list in her head of what the next 6 weeks required. Pediatrician, hospital registration. The specific items she had not yet purchased because the Kang family's nursery had been something she had been told not to worry about, and she had let herself not worry about it, which had been a mistake. One of the longer list of mistakes she was in the process of cataloging without self-pity. She ordered what she needed, had it delivered, built the crib herself on a Wednesday afternoon with a YouTube tutorial on her laptop and an Allen wrench and a level of focused stubbornness that left her on her knees on the guest suite floor for an hour and produced, at the end, a crib that was correctly assembled and that she felt an unreasonable satisfaction about. Seong-woo appeared in the doorway at some point during the final stage of this process. She did not know how long he had been there before she noticed him. "I could have had someone," he started. "I know," she said, tightening the last bolt. He was quiet for a moment. "There's food in the main kitchen if you haven't eaten," he said. "I'll find it." He left. She finished the crib and sat back on her heels and looked at it, and permitted herself 30 seconds of something that was not quite pride and not quite grief, and was probably both. The news broke on a Thursday. She found out the way she had not expected to find out. Not from Seong-woo, not from Bae Soo-jin, but from a message from Park Hyun-soo sent at 7 in the morning that said only, "Amara, call me. Now." She called him. "How much do you know," he said without greeting, "about the old Han Kang agreement?" She went still. "Tell me what you mean." 15 years ago. His voice was doing the thing it did when he was frightened, compressing itself, becoming smaller. "Before you. Before Min Jae took succession. There was an agreement between the Han network and the Kang family about bloodline succession rights. A mutual protection clause." A pause. "It was sealed when my uncle was still in power. Seong-woo's father was the Han patriarch then." "Hyun-soo." She kept her voice flat. "Say the specific thing." "The agreement states that if a Han patriarch formally acknowledges a child carrying Kang bloodline as part of his household, that child inherits a protected position in both succession structures." He was speaking faster now, the words losing their careful spacing. "Both, Han and Kang. It was written as a stability mechanism, a way to prevent either family from destroying the other if there was ever shared blood involved. Nobody thought it would ever actually—" He stopped. "Amara, your daughter carries Kang bloodline. Seong-woo just formally registered the marriage with the full document set, including the lineage clause. Do you understand what that means?" She was sitting on the edge of the guest suite bed with the phone against her ear and her other hand flat against her belly, and she understood exactly what it meant, and what she did not yet know was whether Seong-woo had known about this clause when he made his proposal. "When was this agreement made public?" she said. "It wasn't. My uncle's lawyers just found it. They were going through the archive documents because of the marriage registration, and they—" Another stop. "Amara, Madam Kang is not going to absorb this quietly." "I know." "You need to understand that quietly is not even on the table. She has already called 3 senior family members this morning. She is—" She could hear him breathing, unsteady. "She is saying that Seong-woo engineered this, that he targeted you specifically because of the child, that the entire proposal was a strategy to use your daughter to gain legal leverage over the Kang succession." The room was very quiet. The garden beyond the window was gray and bare and perfectly still. "Thank you," she said. "Don't call me again today." She hung up. She sat with the phone in her hand for 2 minutes, which was longer than she usually permitted herself to sit with anything difficult. Then she stood and she walked through the guest suite corridor and into the main section of the estate for the first time since she had moved in, and she followed the sound of a conversation being conducted in low, urgent Korean until she found the room it was coming from. A study, dark wood and bookshelves, and a desk that had the worn, functional quality of a surface that was actually used. And she pushed the door open without knocking. Jong-woo was standing behind the desk. Two men she recognized from the estate's regular foot traffic were seated across from him. All three looked up. "Out," she said to the two men. They looked at Jong-woo. "Out," he said. They left. She closed the door behind them and stood with her back against it and looked at him across the study. "The Hong Kong bloodline agreement," she said. "How long have you known about it?" He did not flinch, which she had expected. He did not reach for an explanation immediately, which she had not. He sat down, slowly with the deliberateness of a man choosing how to occupy space in a room where the temperature had changed. "I found it 8 weeks before I called you," he said. 8 weeks. She did the math, 6 weeks before the banquet, before Min-jae stood at the microphone, before any of this. "You knew about the agreement before you called me that night," she said. "Yes." The word landed in the room and stayed there. "Tell me," she said, "exactly what you knew and when you knew it. All of it. Not the version that makes this easier to hear." He looked at her for a moment with an expression she could not fully classify, something that had discomfort in it, which she had not seen on his face before, and something that looked like the specific effort of a man choosing honesty over management. "My lawyers found the agreement in the archive during a review of historical Hong Kong documents," he said. "We were building a case for a different dispute. The clause was buried in a succession rider from 15 years ago. My father signed it. I didn't know it existed." A pause. "When I read it, I understood what it meant for any child carrying Kang bloodline raised in a Han household. And then Min-jae humiliated his pregnant wife in public." "And then Min-jae did what he did," Jong-woo said. "Yes." She pressed her back against the door. The child was moving. She felt it, low and insistent, the baby registering the tension in her body the way it always did, responding to her heartbeat. "You proposed to me because of my daughter," she said. "I proposed to you because of several things simultaneously," he said. "The agreement was one of them. What Min-jae did was one of them. Your specific situation was one of them. Did you tell me all your reasons when you proposed?" "I told you I had strategic reasons." "You told me the rivalry reason," she said. "You did not tell me about the agreement." He was quiet. "That," she said, "is a lie. Not a big dramatic lie. The quiet kind. The kind that dresses itself up as an incomplete disclosure and hopes the person on the other side doesn't ask the right question." Her voice was level, without heat, which was worse somehow than anger would have been. "I told you my condition. No lies. Things that affect me and my child. You tell me before I find out another way." "I know. I found out another way." "I know." He said it without deflection, without the particular male reflex of turning accountability into an explanation. He just said it and let it be what it was. "I intended to tell you before the documents were filed. I handled the timing incorrectly." "Why didn't you tell me when you proposed?" A longer pause. "Because I didn't know if you would agree," he said. "And I wanted you to agree." The honesty of it was disarming in a way she hadn't prepared for, and she hated that it was, because she needed her clarity right now. She needed the clean simplicity of a betrayal she could act on, and instead she had something more complicated and more human and much more difficult to navigate. "My daughter," she said carefully, "is now legally positioned to inherit succession rights in both the Han and Kyang family structures." "Yes." "Without her consent, without my consent, because of an agreement two men made 15 years ago." "Yes." "And Madame Kang is currently telling every senior family member that you engineered this from the beginning." "I would expect nothing less from her." "Is she wrong?" The question sat in the room. He looked at her directly. "She's partially right," he said. "I knew about the agreement. I saw the opportunity. I also saw a woman standing on a pavement in January who had just been publicly destroyed by a man who should have protected her, and I made a phone call that I would make again. He paused. Both things are true. I'm not asking you to find that comfortable. She pushed off from the door. She moved to the window on the far side of the study and looked out at a different section of garden than her room faced. This one had stone paths, an adornment fountain, and the bare architecture of something that would be beautiful in another season. What happens now? She said. Not a question. A demand for information. The Kong family will challenge the agreement's validity, he said. Their lawyers will argue it was superseded. They will lose that argument because my lawyers have already built the counter case, but it will take time and it will be visible and it will not be quiet. And my daughter is at the center of it. Yes? She's not born yet. I know. She turned from the window. I need you to understand something, she said. My daughter is not a succession instrument. She is not a legal mechanism. She is not a piece of your rivalry with the Kang family or the resolution of a 15-year-old document. She is a person who will be born in 6 weeks and who I will protect with everything I have. I understand that. Then tell me what protection looks like, she said, concretely, not philosophically. He stood. He moved to the desk and opened a drawer and took out a folder, and she understood from the thickness of it that this had already been prepared. 3 things, he said. Legal insulation. Her succession rights are registered but dormant, meaning no family can activate them without her explicit adult consent. Her identity is protected from public record until she is of age. And physically, he set the folder on the desk. This estate has a security structure that covers everyone who lives in it, including the guest suite. She crossed to the desk and picked up the folder and opened it and read the first page, then the second. She was a woman who had spent 4 years learning how powerful families built their defenses, and she knew how to read what she was looking at, and what she was looking at was comprehensive in a way that had required significant prior preparation. You built this before I signed the documents, she said. Yes. Before I agreed to anything. Yes. She set the folder down, looked at him. Why? Because regardless of what you decided, he said, the child was going to need it. The room was very quiet. She picked the folder back up. She walked to the door of the study, and then she stopped with her hand on the frame because a thought had arrived that she needed to say out loud before it compressed itself into something she would act on without examining. If I had said no, she said, without turning around, if I had taken the money and left Korea, would you still have filed the agreement registration? A pause that lasted long enough to be real. No, he said. The agreement only activates within a Han household. If you had left, it would have remained dormant. She absorbed that. So I activated it, she said, by signing. By choosing to stay, he said. Yes. She stood in the doorway for a moment longer. Then she walked back toward the guest suite with the folder under her arm and the child moving and the particular cold weight of understanding exactly how much of her situation had been shaped by forces that predated her by 15 years. She was halfway down the corridor when she heard his voice behind her, quieter than his normal register. Amara? She stopped, did not turn. I will answer every question you have, he said, all of them, whenever you want. She stood still for 3 seconds. Then she kept walking. She reached the guest suite and set the folder on the desk and stood at the window looking at the bare winter garden, and understood, with the total unsparing clarity that arrives after shock has finished and the mind has returned to its actual functioning, that she had walked out of one man's controlled narrative and directly into another man's prepared structure, and the difference between the two, the only difference she had found so far, was that this one had told her the truth when she pressed him for it, and had built her daughter a set of protections before he had any reason to believe she would stay. That was not enough to forgive. It was enough to think with. Her phone lit up on the desk. Not Hyun-soo, not Bae-soo Jin. A number she did not recognize, different from any previous unknown number, with a text message that contained 4 words and a file attachment. The 4 words were, "You should see this." She opened the attachment. It was a photograph, taken inside a restaurant she recognized, a private dining room at a hotel in Gangnam where she had attended 2 Kang family dinners. The photograph showed 2 people at a table, and one of them was Han Seong-woo, and the other was Madame Kang Hyejin, and the timestamp in the corner of the image read 14 months ago, which was 4 months before Min Jae had stood at that microphone. And they were not eating, and they were not arguing, and they were leaning toward each other across the table with the specific posture of two people who have agreed on something and are working out the final details of how it gets done. She did not sleep. She sat at the guest suite desk with the photograph on her phone screen and the folder of protection documents open beside it, and she went through every conversation she had replayed in her mind over the past 3 weeks, and looked at each one differently now. The way you look at a room after the lights come on and discover the furniture was never arranged the way you thought. 14 months ago. Xiangwoo and Hyejin at a table in Gangnam. 4 months before the banquet. She pulled out the legal pad she had been using for notes and wrote a timeline. Not emotionally. She made herself do it the way she had once built financial projections in Legos, sequentially, without investment in any particular outcome, following the logic to wherever it led. The Hong Kong bloodline agreement discovered by Seong-woo's lawyers, the meeting with Hyejin, then Min Jae's performance at the microphone, then the phone call on the pavement, then the proposal with its careful conditions, its pre-built protections, its capital transfer time to the hour. She stared at the timeline. The meeting could mean several things. She was disciplined enough to hold that. It could be coincidence, which she did not believe. It could be that Seong-woo and Hyejin had met to discuss the existing Han Kang rivalry, and the photograph had been taken out of context by someone with an interest in destabilizing her specifically. It could be that Seong-woo had met with Hyejin to negotiate something that had nothing to do with Amara, and the timing was a function of their ongoing opposition. Or it could be exactly what it looked like. Two powerful people in a room together 4 months before her life was dismantled, discussing how the pieces would fall. She picked up her phone at 2 a.m. and called the number that had sent the photograph. It rang 4 times. No answer. No voicemail. She set the phone down. At 4, she heard movement in the main section of the estate. Footsteps, a door, voices low and brief. At 4:30, the estate went quiet again. She sat at the desk until gray light began building at the edge of the garden window, and then she stood, and she went to wash her face, and she looked at herself in the bathroom mirror for a long moment. She looked tired. She looked 8 months pregnant and 3 weeks inside a situation she had not fully mapped, and she looked like a woman who was about to make a decision that could not be unmade. She was. At 7, she knocked on the door of Seong-woo's study. He was already there. She suspected he had not slept either. He was at the desk with a cup of coffee and his jacket off, shirt sleeves turned back, and he looked up when she came in with the focused alertness of someone who had been waiting for exactly this. She put her phone on his desk with the photograph on the screen. He looked at it. His face did the thing she had been watching for. Not guilt. She had learned that guilt was not this man's primary register, but something more interior than that. A tightening around the eyes that was the expression of someone absorbing a consequence they had calculated might arrive. "Who sent this?" he said. "Unknown number. Didn't answer when I called back." She stood on the other side of the desk with her arms at her sides. "Tell me what that meeting was." He looked at the photograph for another second. Then he set the phone face down on the desk and sat back. "Hyejin contacted me," he said, 14 months ago. She had found out about the bloodline agreement through her own channels. I don't know how. She came to me with a proposal. "What proposal?" "She wanted to use the agreement," he said. "Not the way it has been used. She wanted Min Jae to divorce you first, publicly, damaging your standing enough that you would have no legal ground to activate anything. Then she wanted to negotiate a separate arrangement where your daughter's succession rights were transferred to a Kang-controlled structure in exchange for Han network cooperation on their southern alliances." The room was completely silent. "She wanted to use my daughter," Amara said, "as a bargaining chip between your family and hers." "Yes. And you met with her to discuss this." "I met with her to understand what she knew and what she intended," he said. "And to tell her no." "You told her no." "I told her no." She looked at him. The morning light through the study window was thin and gray and fell across the desk between them without warmth. "And then 4 months later, Min Jae did exactly what she wanted him to do at that banquet," she said. "He divorced you publicly, damaged your standing. He did everything Hyejin told you about in that room." "Yes." Which means she did it anyway, Amara said. Without you. Or with someone else, Seong-woo said. His voice had gone flat in a new way. I have been working on that question since I saw where you were going with this. She put her hands on the edge of his desk and leaned forward and looked at him directly. Did you know she was going to move forward without you? No. Did you suspect it? A pause that lasted 2 seconds too long. I thought it was possible, he said. I increased the timeline on my legal preparation because I thought it was possible. She straightened up, stepped back, turned to the window because she needed to not be looking at him for a moment while she processed what that meant. That he had known Hye-jin might move unilaterally, had prepared for it, had positioned himself to be ready, and had still not told her any of this when he called her on the pavement, or when he sat across from her in that Seongdong-gu restaurant, or when he gave her documents she spent 2 nights reading as if they were the complete picture. How many things, she said to the window, do you know about my situation that you have not told me? Less than you think, he said. More than I should have kept. She turned back. That is not an answer. There is a legal threat, he said. Active, not theoretical. Hye-jin's lawyers filed a challenge to the bloodline agreement registration 4 days ago. I didn't tell you because my lawyers believed they could resolve it before it required your involvement. That involves my daughter. I know. That is not your decision to make without me. I know. He said it without argument, without the instinct to defend the choice, and that absence of defense was in some ways harder to handle than a fight would have been. I made the wrong call. I was trying to protect you from something you didn't need to carry yet. I don't need protection from information, she said. Her voice had gone cold in a way she recognized as the register she reached when anger had burned through its own fuel and become something more structural. I need protection from people who make decisions about my child without my knowledge. That includes you. He looked at her and did not look away and did not speak. Show me the filing, she said. He opened the desk drawer and removed a document she knew he had not pulled from the drawer in the past 30 seconds. It had been sitting there, ready, which meant he had been expecting this conversation and had the material prepared, which was either considerate or an additional layer of management, and she did not currently have the bandwidth to determine which. She took the document and read it standing at his desk. The Kang family's legal challenge was built on 3 arguments. The first contested the agreement's continued validity on procedural grounds. A technical argument about succession ratification timelines that her non-lawyer reading identified as thin. The second argued that the bloodline clause required formal Han patriarch acknowledgement of the child, which had not yet occurred since the child had not been born. The third argument was the one that stopped her reading. It claimed that Amara Ellis was not a legitimate party to the Han household registration because her marriage to Han Seong-woo had been coerced under conditions of psychological and financial vulnerability following her separation from Kang Min-jae. She read that paragraph twice. They're arguing I didn't consent, she said. Yes. They're going to put me in front of a legal process and argue that I was too damaged to make my own decisions. That is the strategy, Seong-woo said, and it requires you to respond personally. My lawyers cannot answer it for you. She set the document down on the desk. When? She said. The preliminary hearing is in 9 days. 9 days. The child was due in 4 weeks. She stood at the desk of a man she had married 17 days ago and looked at a legal document designed by her former mother-in-law to remove her daughter's future before the child had drawn a first breath, and she felt something happen in her chest. Not breaking, the opposite of breaking. Something compressing and hardening into a shape that had more edges than anything she had walked around with before. Get your lawyer on the phone, she said. And mine, this morning. He was already reaching for his phone. The next 9 days were the most ferocious of her life, and she would think of them later as the period when she stopped being someone things happened to and became someone who made things happen. And the transition was not clean or dramatic. It was exhausting and granular and happened in increments of 2 and 3 hours at a time, in conference rooms and over phones and in documents reviewed at midnight, with her back screaming and the baby pressing against her ribs. Bae Soo-jin and Seong-woo's lead attorney, a man named Choi Dae-hyun, who had the compact, precise energy of someone who had never lost a case he believed in, built her response filing in 6 days. She was in every session, every decision about framing, every piece of documentation they pulled, every counter-argument. She read it, questioned it, approved it, or sent it back. Choi Dae-hyun had initially looked at her with the measured patience of a professional managing a client's emotional investment in legal strategy. And by day 3, he had stopped doing that and started treating her like someone whose judgment he needed to factor in. She gathered her own documentation. Bank records demonstrating the capital transfer preceded the ceremony. Communications with Bae Soo-jin time-stamped from before the marriage, showing her own legal counsel operating independently. The signed documents with her conditions, her handwriting, her language, evidence of a woman who had negotiated terms rather than accepted them passively. On the 5th day, Min-ja called again. She answered because she had decided she was done letting his calls go to silence. Silence was management. She was not managing anymore. "I know about the hearing," he said. "Good," she said. "Then you know your family is trying to argue I wasn't competent to make my own decisions." A pause. "That's not—" He stopped. "I didn't authorize that argument." "Did you authorize any of the filing?" Another pause, longer. "The family legal team operates—" "Min-jae," she cut through it. "Did you tell your mother's lawyers to stand down? Yes or no?" Silence. "No," he said. "Then you authorized it," she said. "Absence of refusal is authorization in a family like yours, and you know that." She heard him exhale. It was a sound she recognized, the exhale of a man confronting something about himself that he has been outrunning. "What do you want?" he said. It came out raw, not calculated. The first thing he had said to her in months that sounded like a human being rather than a position. "I want you to file a statement," she said. "From you personally, not the family legal team, confirming that our marriage was entered into by both parties willingly and that my departure from the household following the January banquet was a result of your choices and not any incapacity on my part." Silence. "That exposes me," he said. "Yes," she said, "it does." A long pause. "And if I do it," he said, "what do I get?" She had been waiting for that. She had prepared for it. "Access," she said, "to your daughter. When she is born, when I have determined the environment is appropriate. Not custody, not legal standing, access on my terms, because she is going to know who her father is, and I am not going to be the person who makes that impossible." She paused. "That is the only thing I am offering. It is not negotiable, and it will not be offered again." The silence lasted long enough that she thought he had ended the call. "I'll have the statement to your lawyer by tomorrow morning," he said. She hung up. The statement arrived at 7:14 the following morning. Bae Soo-jin called her at 7:30 to tell her it was thorough and would be effective. Amara was eating toast in the guest suite, and she said thank you and finished her toast. The preliminary hearing was on a Thursday. The courtroom was not the dramatic arena she had constructed in her more tired moments. It was a civil courtroom in Seo-cho-gu, functional and fluorescent lit, with the subdued procedural atmosphere of a space where conflict was processed rather than resolved. She sat at the respondent table with Bae Soo-jin and Choi Dae-hyun, and across the room the Kang family's legal team occupied 4 chairs with the territorial precision of people accustomed to winning rooms before they opened. Madam Kang Hye-jin was present. She sat behind the legal team in the gallery in a dark coat with her hands folded in her lap and her face arranged in the expression of a woman attending to a necessary task. She did not look at Amara when Amara came in. Then she did. One look, brief and complete, the look of a woman taking the full measure of something she had underestimated. Amara looked back. She did not look away first. The hearing ran 4 hours. She had been told hearings of this type typically ran 90 minutes. The Kang legal team's procedural arguments on the agreement validity took 40 minutes, and Choi Dae-hyun's response took 30, and the presiding judge, a woman in her 50s with the reading glasses and the contained attention of someone who had sat through every variation of powerful families eating their own, listened without expression to both. The coercion argument was presented by the Kang team's lead counsel, a man who knew how to make sympathy and legal argument sound like the same thing, who described Amara's situation following the January banquet in language that was technically accurate and comprehensively wrong, who built a picture of a vulnerable woman without options who had been guided into an arrangement by a man more powerful than her circumstances allowed her to refuse. Bae Soo-jin stood up. She placed the capital transfer documentation before the court. Min-jae's statement. Amara's condition list in her own handwriting. Communications demonstrating independent legal counsel from before the ceremony. A timeline constructed with the precision of a woman who had spent 6 days making sure every hour was accounted for. Then Amara herself was called to speak. She stood. She was 37 weeks pregnant and she had not slept more than 5 hours in any night of the past 9 days, and her back hurt with the constant low insistence of a body being asked to carry more than it was designed for. And she stood at the front of that courtroom and she spoke for 12 minutes without notes. She did not perform. She did not appeal. She described, with the flat, documented precision of someone who had built a case rather than a story, every condition she had set, every document she had reviewed, every decision she had made, and when she had made it and why. She described the night of the banquet not as a trauma, but as a data point, the moment at which she received accurate information about her marriage and began acting on it. She described Han Seong-woo's proposal not as a rescue, but as an offer she had evaluated, negotiated, and accepted on terms she dictated. She said, "I have spent 4 years in this country being managed by people who believed my circumstances made me manageable. The argument this court is being asked to accept is that I was too damaged to consent. I want the court to examine the documentation and determine whether it describes a damaged woman or a woman who knew exactly what she was doing." She sat down. Bae Soo-jin did not look at her. She was writing something on her legal pad, but her pen had stopped moving and she was not actually writing anything, which was the closest to an emotional response Amara had seen from her in 9 days. The judge called a recess. In the corridor outside the courtroom, Seong-woo was waiting. He had been present in the gallery through the hearing. She had not looked at him directly, had been aware of him the way you are aware of weather, and now he was standing near the window at the end of the hall with his hands in his coat pockets and the particular stillness of a man who has learned to wait without performing patience. She stopped in front of him. "The coercion argument fails," he said. It was not a question. "It fails," she said. He nodded. Something moved in his face, brief and controlled. "The agreement validity argument," she said. "Choi Dae-hyun is confident?" "He's confident." She looked at him for a moment. The corridor was empty except for the two of them and the distant movement of court staff at the far end. "The photograph," she said. "Hyejin and you. When she made the proposal, you refused. Did she threaten you if you moved against her independently?" He was quiet for a half-second. "She indicated that she had documentation that could complicate my position with the Southern Network," he said. "So she had leverage on you." "She believed she did." "Does she?" "Less than she did before today," he said. She studied his face. The thin winter light from the corridor window fell across his jaw and the lines at the corners of his eyes, and he looked, for the first time since she had met him, not like a man who controlled rooms, but like a man who was standing in a situation he had helped construct and was no longer sure of the shape of it. "When this hearing closes," she said, "I need everything. Every document, every communication, every piece of information that exists in your organization about my daughter's legal position and the threats to it. Not filtered, not timed for my benefit, everything." "Agreed," he said without hesitation. "And Seong-woo," she held his gaze, "if there is ever again something that affects me or my child that you know and I don't, I will not ask for an explanation. I will simply be gone. Do you understand?" He looked at her for a long moment. "I understand," he said. She turned and walked back toward the courtroom. Behind her, she heard him speak once more, quietly, in the tone he used when he was not performing anything. "For what it's worth," he said, "what you did in there was the most precise thing I have ever watched anyone do in a legal proceeding." She did not stop walking, but she felt it land somewhere beneath the exhaustion and the back pain and the 9 days of compressed ferocity, felt it land and register as something small and real in the part of her that had not yet decided what this man was to her. The judge's preliminary ruling came at 4:17 that afternoon. The coercion argument was dismissed. The procedural challenge to the agreement would proceed to a full hearing, but the registration stood pending that hearing, which meant her daughter's position was protected in the interim. The Kong family's legal team received the ruling with the controlled absence of expression that was the professional equivalent of absorbing a blow. Hyejin stood. She buttoned her coat. She looked across the room at Amara, and the look was different from the one in the gallery. It was not assessment anymore. It was the look of a woman recalibrating her understanding of what she was dealing with, and in that recalibration was the first evidence Amara had seen that Madame Kang Hyejin was capable of something that resembled recognition. Then Hyejin looked past Amara to where Seong-woo stood near the door, and her expression did something that had nothing to do with legal strategy. It was fear, not performed, not managed, the real thing, involuntary and quick, there and gone in under a second. Amara filed it. She walked out of this courthouse into the late afternoon Seoul air, February cold and heavy with the smell of coming snow, and she stood on the steps and breathed and put both hands against her belly where the child was moving with the sudden urgent energy of someone who had been listening to a very long day and had something to say about it. 4 weeks. 4 weeks, and the person at the center of all of this would arrive in the world, and everything that had been fought over in documents and courtrooms and whispered conversations would become real in a different way. Would become a face, a set of hands, a daughter who would grow up knowing her mother had stood in rooms full of powerful people and had not moved. Her phone lit up in her coat pocket. A message from Bae Soo-jin. Full hearing is scheduled, 6 weeks out. Kang legal team filed a secondary motion 20 minutes ago that I need to discuss with you tonight. It's significant. She looked at the message. Then she looked up at the Seoul sky, gray and dense with the snow that hadn't fallen yet. The city indifferent and enormous around her. And she thought about Hyejin's face in that final moment. The fear, the recalibration, and beneath both of those, something she had not expected to find in that woman's expression. A question. Not how far will you go? Hyejin already knew the answer to that. The question in her eyes had been something else entirely, and it had taken Amara the walk down the courthouse steps to identify it. And now that she had identified it, she understood that the secondary motion Bae Soo-jin needed to discuss was not a legal maneuver. It was Hyejin's last weapon. And the question in the older woman's eyes had been, does she know what it is yet? Bae Soo-jin was already at the estate when Amara arrived back from the courthouse. She was sitting in the main reception room with her briefcase open on the low table and 2 documents laid out side by side with the careful arrangement of someone who had organized bad news into the most digestible possible form. She stood when Amara came in, and the look on her face, controlled, professional, but with something underneath it that was not either of those things, confirmed what Amara had read in Hyejin's eyes on the courthouse steps. Seong-woo came in from the corridor behind Amara. He stopped when he saw Bae Soo-jin's face and the documents on the table. "Sit down," Bae Soo-jin said to both of them. Amara sat. Seong-woo remained standing for a moment, then sat in the chair beside Amara with the deliberate quality of a man choosing proximity over position. "The secondary motion the Kang family filed this afternoon," Bae Soo-jin said, "is a paternity challenge." The room was quiet. "They are arguing," Bae Soo-jin continued, "that the child Amara is carrying may not be Min-jae's biological daughter. They have filed a motion requesting a court-ordered paternity test to be conducted upon the child's birth before any succession rights can be formally acknowledged." Amara looked at the documents on the table. "On what basis?" she said. Her voice was level. She was not going to give the room anything it didn't need from her. "They've submitted a statement from a former member of the Kang household staff," Bae Soo-jin said, "claiming that during the final year of your marriage, you were seen on multiple occasions in private meetings with a male associate. The statement implies a sustained personal relationship." "That's fabricated," Amara said. "I know," Bae Soo-jin said, "but the motion doesn't require the allegation to be true. It only requires the court to find it plausible enough to order the test, and a test ordered by a court cannot be refused without significant legal consequence. If I refuse, it constitutes grounds for suspension of the succession registration pending investigation. Your daughter's protected position is frozen until resolution, which could take months, during which time the Kang family's challenge to the agreement continues running." Amara sat with that. The child moved inside her. A long, slow movement, the kind she associated with the baby stretching, running out of room, impatient with confinement. She pressed her hand against her side where the movement was and kept her face still. "How did they get a staff member to sign that statement?" Seong-woo said. His voice had gone to a register she had not heard from him before. Flat and cold in a way that was different from his usual flatness. This was the temperature of a man calculating damage. "Financial incentive, most likely," Bae Soo-jin said. "The statement is from a woman who worked in the household kitchen for 2 years. She left the Kong employ 8 months ago." "Her name," Seong-woo said. "That's not," Bae Soo-jin started. "Her name," Amara said. Bae Soo-jin looked at Amara for a moment. Then she looked at the document and read the name. Seong-woo took his phone out. "Don't," Amara said. He looked at her. "Whatever you're about to do," she said, "don't do it tonight and don't do it without telling me first." She held his gaze. "That's how we do this now." A beat. He put his phone back in his pocket. Bae Soo-jin watched this exchange with the carefully neutral expression of a lawyer filing information for later. "What are our options?" Amar said. 3, Bae Soo-jin said. "We consent to the paternity test, which resolves the challenge immediately upon the child's birth and confirms Min-jae's paternity. We challenge the motion on procedural grounds and delay, which buys time but signals defensiveness. Or," she paused, "we get ahead of it. We approach Min-jae directly and request that he publicly withdraw support from his family's legal strategy, including this motion, prior to the court's ruling on its admissibility." "I already have his statement from the coercion case," Amara said. "This is different. This is asking him to actively oppose his own family's legal filing, to be on record against Madam Kang's strategy." Bae Soo-jin's voice was careful. "That's not something a statement from yesterday covers." Amara looked at the 2 documents on the table for a long time. "Consent to the test," she said. Bae Soo-jin looked up. "That's the most direct path, but it requires—" "I know what it requires. File the consent." She stood, which took the physical coordination that it always took now, the weight redistributing as she rose. "My daughter's paternity is not a mystery. Let them run the test, let them get the result in front of the court, and let Madam Kang sit in that room when it comes back." Bae Soo-jin gathered the documents. "I'll file in the morning." She left. Seong-woo and Amara were alone in the reception room. The estate was quiet around them. The particular quiet of a large space with few people in it, the kind of quiet that has weight. "She'll have a contingency," Seong-woo said. "Hye-jin, if the paternity challenge fails." "I know," Amara said. "She always has a contingency. It's the thing she and I have most in common." She picked up her coat from the back of the chair. "I need to sleep. Tomorrow I need you to give me everything your organization has on the staff member who signed that statement, not to use against her, to understand who reached her and how. I'll have it by morning." She walked toward the corridor. "Amara." She stopped. "I should have told you about the meeting with Hye-jin before you asked," he said, "not as a concession, as an acknowledgement." She stood with her back to him for a moment. "I know," she said. "We'll discuss what that means for us when the immediate situation is resolved." She did not turn around. "Good night, Seong-woo." She went to her room. She lay on her side in the dark and listened to the February wind move against the estate windows and thought about Hye-jin's contingency. And by 2 in the morning, she thought she knew what it was, and by 3 she was certain, and at 4 she stopped trying to sleep and sat at the desk and began writing. Zuri. She had decided on the name 3 weeks ago and had not told anyone yet. Zuri, from Swahili. Beautiful. Her grandmother's word for the quality of things that endured. She wrote it at the top of the legal pad, and then beneath it she wrote everything she knew about the situation her daughter was being born into, and then beneath that she wrote what she intended to do about it. And the writing took 2 hours, and at the end of it she had a plan that was not elegant and was not without cost and was the only thing she could see that closed every open door. She called Min-jae at 6 in the morning. He answered on the second ring, which told her he had not been sleeping either. "Your mother filed a paternity challenge," she said. Silence. "Min-jae, did you know?" I found out an hour after it was filed, he said. His voice had the raw, compressed quality of a man who had been sitting with something unbearable. I didn't authorize it. I tried to pull it back. Their lead counsel told me the family trust structure gives them standing to file independent of my approval. Can you override it? Not through the legal structure. A pause. But I can appear in court, personally, and state under oath that I have no doubt about my daughter's paternity and that I oppose the motion. It was the word daughter that caught her. He had said it without hesitation, without the careful distancing language he had used in every previous conversation. That will cost you with your family, she said. I know what it costs, he said. She looked out the window at the garden. The first light was coming, pale and gradual, touching the bare branches with a gray that was almost blue. Why? She said, not combatively. She needed to understand the actual thing. A long pause. Because I have spent 10 months watching what I did to you play out in front of everyone I know, Min-jae said slowly. And I have run out of ways to tell myself it was necessary. His voice broke slightly on the last word, and he did not try to cover it. And because she's my daughter, and I'm not going to let my mother use her as a legal instrument, not for any alliance, not for any empire. A breath. I should have said that 14 months ago. I didn't. I'm saying it now. Amara sat very still. Be at the court for the admissibility hearing, she said. Bring your own lawyer. Separate from the family team. Bae Soo-jin will coordinate. All right. And Min-jae, she paused. This is the last time I negotiate on your behalf with your own conscience. After this, your relationship with your daughter is built on what you actually do, not what you tell me you intend. I understand, he said. She ended the call. The admissibility hearing for the paternity motion was 4 days later. Min-jae arrived with his own counsel, a separation from the Kang family legal team that was visible and deliberate and that sent a fracture through the family's unified front that every person in the room understood the significance of. He sat in the gallery in a dark suit without his family around him, and when the judge asked whether the petitioning family had unified standing on the motion, the Kang legal team could not answer yes without Min-jae's explicit support, and Min-jae did not give it. He stood when given the opportunity, and he said, in the contained, careful voice of a man who had prepared what he needed to say and was not going to deviate from it, that he did not support the paternity challenge, that he had no uncertainty about his daughter's biological parentage, and that he was formally dissociating from the motion. The judge looked at him for a moment over her reading glasses. Then she looked at the Kang family's legal team. The motion was denied admissibility on the grounds that the petitioning party lacked unified standing. Hye-jin was in the gallery again. Same dark coat, same folded hands. When the ruling was delivered, she looked at her son across the room with an expression that Amara, seated at the respondent table, could see from 40 feet away. It was not anger. It was something more fundamental than anger. The look of a woman confronting the moment when the architecture she has spent decades constructing reveals a structural failure she did not plan for. The failure was her son choosing his daughter over her empire. She had not planned for that because she had never believed he was capable of it. After the hearing cleared, Amara found Hye-jin in the corridor. She had not planned this. She had not strategized it. She was walking toward the exit, and Hye-jin was standing near the window at the end of the hall, alone for the first time that Amara had ever seen around her. Her legal team having moved ahead, and her son having left without speaking to her, and she was looking out the window at the Seoul street below with the stillness of a woman who had not yet decided what posture to adopt for this new landscape. Amara stopped beside her. They stood at the window together for a moment without speaking. Below, the city moved in its ordinary February business, indifferent to everything that had just occurred in the room behind them. You underestimated me from the beginning, Amara said, not with heat, as a statement of fact. Hye-jin did not turn from the window. Yes, she said. Her voice was smaller than Amara had ever heard it, not broken, reduced, the way a controlled burn reduces something without destroying it entirely. The meeting with Seong-woo, Amara said, 14 months ago. You went to him because you already knew about the bloodline agreement. A pause. I had known for 2 years, Hyejin said, and you tried to use it. I tried to control it. Her eyes remained on the window. There is a difference. Not from where I've been standing, Amara said. Hyejin was quiet for a moment. Then she said something Amara had not expected. You are the most capable person who has ever entered this family. She said it without warmth, without apology, without any of the softening that would have made it easier to hear. I knew that within 6 months of your marriage. It was the reason I worked against you. The honesty of it was so undecorated that it required a moment to absorb. Because capable was threatening, Amara said. Because capable and foreign and outside every structure I had built was threatening. A pause. I was wrong, not in the assessment, in what I chose to do with it. Amara looked at the side of the older woman's face, the lines at her temple, the jeweled clip in her hair, the same one she had worn at the banquet in January, and Amara thought about that night and the magnolia perfume and the half-second pause before the doorman stepped aside and all the accumulated weight of 4 years of being managed by a woman who feared what she represented. Zuri will know her Kang bloodline, Amara said. She will know this family's history. She will know Min Jae as her father. She paused. What she will not know, until she is old enough to make her own judgment, is what her grandmother did before she was born. That is not a gift I'm giving you. That is a decision I am making for my daughter's sake, because she deserves to form her own understanding of people without inheriting my history with them. Hyejin turned from the window for the first time. She looked at Amara directly, and the look was complicated in the way that only looks from people who have spent decades constructing their own invulnerability can be complicated when the construction finally fails. She will be extraordinary, Hyejin said quietly. I know, Amara said. That has nothing to do with you or me. That's just who she is. She walked away. Zuri-han was born on a Thursday morning in early March at 6:42 in a private room at Severance Hospital with Bai Su-jin in the waiting room and Seong-woo somewhere in the building, because Amara had told him he could be there but had not specified where. And she had not specified where because she was not ready to define exactly what his presence meant yet, and she was not going to force a definition before she had one. The labor was 14 hours. At no point during those 14 hours did Amara Ellis perform anything. She was not brave or stoic or quietly suffering. She was a woman in the biological process of bringing another person into the world, and it required everything she had, and was not poetic, and was not cinematic, and was the most real thing she had ever done. When they placed Zuri on her chest, she was quiet. She had expected to cry. She had expected something overwhelming, the particular emotional flooding she had been told about by every woman who had tried to prepare her. Instead, she felt something more interior than that, a deep, structural settling, like a building that has been under construction for years finally bearing actual weight for the first time and discovering that it holds. She looked at her daughter. Zuri looked at her with the unfocused, ancient attention of a person encountering the world for the first seconds, and Amara said, quietly, in Yoruba, which was the language her grandmother had used for the things that mattered most. You are here. I see you. Everything I did before you so you wouldn't have to. The legal proceedings completed over the following 8 weeks. The bloodline agreement was upheld in full. The Kang family's challenge failed on every substantive argument. Zuri's succession rights in both the Han and Kang family structures were formally registered and simultaneously designated dormant until she reached majority and could exercise her own judgment about what she wanted them to mean. Minji came to see Zuri for the first time when she was 3 weeks old. Amara arranged it at the estate, in the garden room that had become her preferred space as the March cold gave way to something that approached warmth. She was seated in the chair she had moved there from the guest suite, with Zuri in her arms, when Min Jae arrived at the door. He was alone. He looked different, not older exactly, but more interior, the particular quality of a man who has stopped maintaining a surface because the surface failed him and he has not yet built a new one. He sat across from her, and she placed Zuri in his arms with the careful instruction of a woman who has assessed a situation and made a decision she is not going to second-guess. He held his daughter. He did not speak for a long time. He looked at her with the total, helpless attention of someone encountering something that reorganizes everything they thought they understood about what matters. And Amara watched him do it, and she felt, not forgiveness, that was too large and too round a word for what she actually felt. Something more specific. The recognition that this man had made choices she would never excuse, and also that this moment was real, and she did not need to diminish it to protect herself. "She has your hands," he said finally. His voice was rough. "She has her own hands," Amar said. He looked up at her. Something passed between them that had no language for itself. The residue of 4 years and the wreckage of one night and everything that had happened in the months since, compressed into a look that acknowledged all of it without requiring either of them to speak it. "I know what I did," he said. "I know you do," she said. "I'm not asking. I know you're not." She held his gaze. "Be her father, Min-jae. That's the only conversation left between us." He nodded. He looked back at Zuri. Sung-woo was at the far end of the garden when Min-jae left an hour later. He was standing near the dormant fountain, which had been turned on for the first time that week as the weather shifted, the water moving again in its basin after months of winter stillness. He was looking at it with the particular attention of a man who was not really looking at the fountain. Amara came to stand beside him. "How was it?" he said. "Necessary," she said. "Good." She stood beside him with Zuri in her arms and the March air carrying the first real warmth of the year and the fountain doing its quiet work beside them. "I need to tell you something." He turned. "I have been trying to determine," she said carefully, "what you are to me. Separate from the documents, separate from the strategy, separate from what you knew and when you knew it, and every decision either of us made in the past 3 months out of calculation rather than—" She paused. "I haven't been able to determine it. I keep running the analysis and it keeps coming back incomplete." He was very still. "I think that means I'm going to have to stop analyzing it," she said, "and simply be in it and see what it becomes." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Zuri, who was awake and doing what she did, observing, with her particular ancient gravity, the world immediately available to her. "That's a significant concession for someone who analyzes everything," he said. "Don't make it precious," she said. Something moved in his face that she had learned to recognize in the past weeks, the expression he had when something reached past the controlled exterior and registered in the actual person underneath. He looked back at the fountain. "I told you I had strategic reasons for calling you that night," he said. "You did. I also called you because I was standing in a room watching a feed from a contact at the banquet, and I watched you set down that glass and stand up and walk out of that room without making a single sound, and something about the way you did it." He stopped. His jaw tightened briefly. "I couldn't not call." She looked at the side of his face. "That," she said, "is the first thing you've told me that wasn't at least partially a strategy." "I know," he said. The fountain ran beside them. Zuri made the small sound she made when she was considering sleep. The garden was warming around them in the slow, unspectacular way of Seoul in early spring, bare branches acquiring the faintest suggestion of what they would become. Amara Ellis stood in that garden with her daughter in her arms, and a man beside her whose complexities she had not finished mapping, and an empire of legal documents and family history and hard-won precedent behind her, and she felt, not peace. She was not built for peace in the uncomplicated sense. She was built for engagement and for building and for the specific satisfaction of problems that require everything you have. She felt instead the beginning of something, not happiness as a destination, something more durable than that. The life she had not planned for, that had been built in the wreckage of the life she had planned. She had rebuilt her business contacts over the winter, working from the guest suite in the hours when Zuri allowed. The network she had spent 4 years cultivating inside the Kang family orbit. International connections, trade relationships, contacts across Southeast Asia and West Africa that the Kang family had viewed as a resource they might eventually exploit. She had rebuilt it in her own name. A consultancy. Small at the start, 3 clients, operating out of a rented office in Mapogu that she had signed the lease on with the capital from the Han transfer. By March, it had 6 clients. By April, it would have 10. She was not building someone else's empire. She was building her own, and the difference in how that felt was not something she had words for yet. She was learning Korean. Properly, this time, not the functional household Korean she had acquired in 4 years of living inside a family that preferred to conduct its real conversations in a language she couldn't fully follow. Real Korean, with a tutor who came to the estate 3 mornings a week, and who had initially been surprised by how fast she moved through material and was no longer surprised by anything. She had written to her mother in Lagos for the first time in 8 months. The letter had taken 4 drafts. She had not been able to explain the full picture in any of them, and had eventually stopped trying to explain and simply described Zuri, her weight at birth, the shape of her fingers, the way she looked at the world with the focused, unhurried attention of someone who intended to understand everything available to her. Her mother had called the day the letter arrived, and they had talked for an hour and 40 minutes, and Amara had cried for the first time since January, not from grief, but from the particular relief of a person who has been carrying something alone for a long time and finally sets a portion of it down. She was not finished grieving the marriage. She had not pretended to be. The marriage had been real. Not what she had believed it to be in every detail, but real in the way that 4 years of genuine feeling is real even when it is misplaced. She had loved Min Jae with the particular depth of a woman who loves carefully and does not love often, and that did not become false simply because he had failed it. She carried it the way you carry any real thing that is ended, present, occasionally heavy, no longer bleeding. She thought sometimes about the woman she had been 8 months ago, standing on that pavement in January with nowhere to go. She did not think of her with pity. She thought of her with the specific respect you reserve for someone who did something hard, who stood up in a room where 300 people watched and set down a glass and walked out without sound, who got into a taxi and made a decision and signed documents at midnight and built a crib alone on the floor and stood in a courtroom at 37 weeks pregnant and spoke for 12 minutes without notes. That woman had not been broken on that pavement. She had simply been at the beginning of something she didn't yet know the name of. On the last evening of March, Amara sat in the garden room after Zuri had gone to sleep, with her laptop open and a cup of tea going cold beside her, and the garden visible through the glass in the particular blue dark of a spring evening. She was reviewing the consultancy's quarterly projection, a document she had built herself, without assistance, the first financial model she had constructed for her own enterprise. And it was solid, it was real, it had the architecture of something that would hold weight. She heard Seong Woo in the corridor. He stopped at the open doorway the way he had learned to, not entering, checking, giving her the option of the space. She looked up. "I made food," he said. "If you haven't eaten." "I haven't eaten," she said. He went back toward the kitchen. She saved the document and closed the laptop and followed him, and in the hallway she paused to check on Zuri through the monitor clipped to her pocket. The small breathing, the steady presence of her daughter in the next room, the signal that all was well. All was well. She went to eat dinner in her own house on the last evening of March, in a city that had once seemed designed to refuse her, with a daughter sleeping down the hall and the first quarter of her own business behind her, and whatever was building between her and the man in the kitchen ahead of her. And it was not the life she had come to Korea to find. It was the life that had been waiting on the other side of the worst night she had ever survived. She had walked through that night. She had not looked back.